So, right now, there are thousands of home sellers out there who are basically losing tens of thousands of dollars right on the negotiating table.
Oh, easily. Yeah.
And the crazy part is, they're entirely focused on the wrong number. Like they're obsessing over the dollar sign, right?
Sure.
Pacing through their living rooms, trying to calculate the exact return on a 5-year-old kitchen remodel.
Right.
When in reality, the only metric that actually dictates their leverage is a ticking clock. Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. I'm your host, and I'm joined by our resident real estate analyst to sort of, well, unpack all of this.
Hey, everyone. It's great to be here. And you're so right about that focus on the dollar sign. I mean, we've been completely conditioned by decades of market behavior to view selling a house as this, like, price tag optimization puzzle.
Yeah, like you're pricing a rare collectible or something.
Exactly. The conventional wisdom has always just been, you put a number on this physical asset, you put it out into the world, and you just hold your ground until someone matches that number.
Right.
But that strategy relies on an environment that fundamentally, it just no longer exists.
Which brings us to the core mission of our deep dive today. We're pulling insights from this really fascinating analysis. It's called The Clock and the Curb, Sarasota's Shifting Real Estate Strategy.
It's a great read.
It really is. And the central revelation here is this massive paradigm shift in how we need to think about leverage. Like, the age-old obsession with the starting price is actually, it's a toxic distraction in today's market.
It really is.
What we're exploring today is really the advanced psychology of a shifting housing cycle. We need to look at why the absolute biggest fear in real estate has migrated completely away from price anxiety and morphed into time anxiety.
Yeah, and understanding the psychological shift is honestly, it's the only way a seller maintains any semblance of control right now.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the data driving this anxiety paints a really stark picture of how quickly the market sentiment is fracturing.
Yeah, it's moving fast.
So currently, according to the source, 37% of sellers report that their absolute biggest worry is how long their home will sit on the market. That's not just a passing thought. That is the primary thing keeping them awake at night.
And that 37% figure, I mean, it really requires some context to understand just how heavy that is.
Right, because it was lower before?
Way lower. Just a few months prior, that number was sitting at 30%.
Wow.
And in real estate, which is, typically this very slow-moving, lagging indicator kind of industry, a 7% jump in a core psychological anxiety over a single quarter. That is a violent pivot.
Yeah, it's huge.
It indicates that sellers are sensing this loss of control way before the broader market data even fully reflects it. The ground is literally moving faster than traditional strategies can adapt to.
Okay, so the mechanism behind that anxiety and the source goes into this. It's entirely driven by a cognitive bias on the buyer side, right? It all comes down to social proof.
Exactly. Social proof is everything.
When a home hits the market and just sits there, buyers experience this profound shift in their internal narrative. Like the initial question of, oh man, will someone else buy this before I can? It just vanishes.
It's gone. Poof.
Right. And it's instantly replaced by a much more dangerous question, which is, what's wrong with it?
Yep. Every single time.
It kind of reminds me of, think about a bakery, right? You walk in and there's this beautiful loaf of bread sitting on the shelf. But if you know it's been sitting there for 3 days, even if it looks perfectly fine, you assume it's stale, simply because nobody else bought it.
That's a perfect analogy. Or think about how a tech startup raises capital. If a founder pitches a dozen venture capital firms and their investment round stays open for 6 months with no funds secured, the market makes a collective assumption.
Oh, right. Even if the tech is amazing.
Even if the underlying technology is brilliant, new investors will look at the time on the market and assume the smart money already looked under the hood and found, a fatal flaw.
Wow. Okay, but wait, I want to push back on this idea just a little bit, because looking at how traditional negotiations function, wouldn't a seller objectively prefer to receive, a low-ball offer rather than no offer at all?
You think so, right?
Yeah. I mean, a low offer is a physical document. It means someone walked through the door, liked the property enough to mentally hire an inspector, and actually put a number on paper. Doesn't that initial engagement at least give the seller a foothold to, start a conversation?
It does. A low offer provides a foothold. A vacuum provides absolutely nothing.
Okay.
When we look at the mechanics of leverage, a low offer is a starting point for friction. You can counter a low offer. You can concede on minor terms, like closing costs, While pushing back on the top-line price, you actually have a tangible counterparty.
Right, you have someone to play ping pong with.
Exactly. But zero offers. That is a fundamental collapse of the negotiating table. When a house is just gathering digital dust on a listing portal, the seller has zero mechanisms to create urgency.
Because there's no one there.
Right. You cannot bluff against a phantom buyer. You can't spark a bidding war with a single, hesitant prospect who knows you have no other options. In a vacuum, the seller is completely at the mercy of the days-on-market counter.
The days-on-market counter, that's the ticking clock we're talking about.
That's the clock.
So, if a vacuum of offers is the ultimate deal killer, we really need to examine the mechanics of why these vacuums are forming in the first place. And the source looks specifically at the situation on the ground in Sarasota, which gives us this perfect laboratory to understand what we can call inventory saturation.
Yes, inventory saturation is the key phrase here.
Because in key areas down there, places like Palmer Ranch, Lakewood Ranch, downtown inventory is just steadily, relentlessly building.
And that buildup fundamentally alters buyer psychology. We go straight from a scarcity mindset to buyer fatigue.
Buyer fatigue.
Yeah. Think about it. When a prospective buyer wakes up on a Saturday and sees 3 new comparable listings in Palmer Ranch instead of 0, their entire pacing changes.
They're not rushing anymore.
Exactly. They don't rush to the first open house with a pre-approval letter in hand. They slow down. They schedule 3 showings instead of 1. They start meticulously comparing the lot sizes, the HOA fees, the age of the appliances.
Right, they get picky.
Very picky. The urgency that historically drove those quick, aggressive offers just evaporates. It gets replaced by this hyper-analytical hesitation.
Which leads us to probably the most critical concept in this entire analysis. The golden window.
The golden window.
Yes, the data suggests that this window, so the first 2 to 3 weeks a home is on the market, is basically the only period that actually matters.
It's make or break.
It's the period of maximum exposure. But let's really get into the why here. Why are the buyers in week 1 fundamentally different or fundamentally better than the buyers in week 6?
Because the buyers operating in that golden window are the bloodhounds of the market.
The bloodhounds, I love that.
They are. These are not casual weekend window shoppers. These are highly motivated individuals who have, frankly, probably already lost out on previous bids.
So they're ready to pounce.
They are ready. They have automated alerts set to instant on every major real estate portal. They know the exact floor plan they want, and they know exactly what it should cost.
Right.
So when your listing hits the market, you are capturing the accumulated pent-up demand of everyone who has been waiting for a home exactly like yours.
Okay, that makes sense.
If you capture them, you secure favorable terms. If you miss them, you're relying entirely on the slow trickle of new, uneducated buyers who might enter the market over the next several months.
It's kind of like a blockbuster movie premiere, right? Yeah. If the movie doesn't make a massive splash on opening weekend, theaters just pull it. You can't rely on word of mouth in week 6.
Exactly.
And missing that window triggers what the analysis identifies as the days on market penalty. Once you cross that 3-week threshold, showing activity just falls off a cliff.
It completely drops off.
And here is the brutal part, according to the source. Any price reductions a seller makes after that point become purely reactive. Like, they aren't strategic adjustments anymore. They're basically acts of desperation.
Yeah, and we really have to differentiate between a strategic price adjustment and a reactive price drop, because buyers interpret them completely differently.
Okay, how so?
Well, a strategic move happens rapidly.
Sure.
So perhaps a slight correction within the first 10 days based on immediate high-volume feedback from those highly motivated bloodhound buyers we talked about.
Right. We priced it slightly wrong. Let's fix it right now.
Exactly. But a reactive price drop happens in week 7 because the seller hears crickets. And the psychology of the buyer viewing a week 7 price drop is entirely predatory.
Oh, wow. Predatory.
Absolutely. They don't see a great deal. They see blood in the water.
Yeah.
They assume the seller is distressed. And so instead of rushing to bid the new asking price, they just wait to see if the seller will drop it again.
But wait, let's look at this purely from the perspective of the physical asset itself. Like, if a seller lists a genuinely beautiful house, we're talking perfect structural bones, brand new roof, high-end finishes, incredible landscaping.
Sure.
Does it actually matter if the calendar pages turn? I mean, can a pristine, objectively valuable piece of architecture truly become stale?
It absolutely can. And honestly, this is the most difficult pill for sellers to swallow.
I bet.
Staleness in a high inventory market has absolutely nothing to do with physical degradation.
Right.
The quality of the drywall is completely irrelevant to the days on market penalty.
So what is it about?
Staleness is simply the loss of perceived momentum. When that pristine home misses the golden window, the motivated buyers look at it, maybe they balk at the initial price and they move on.
Right.
A month later, a new buyer logs online, sees a perfectly renovated house that's just been sitting for 45 days, and their cognitive bias takes over. They assume there's a hidden foundational issue or a problem with the neighbors or unpermitted work.
Just because it's sat.
Just because it's sat. The asset hasn't changed a bit, but the market's perception of the asset has fundamentally depreciated.
That is so wild. So the penalty for missing the golden window is essentially catastrophic for a seller's leverage. If you miss opening weekend, you do not get a second chance to make a first impression.
You really don't.
Which brings us to the actionable strategy. How does a seller actually guarantee they hit the ground running? Like, how do they ensure they're capturing those bloodhound buyers on day one? And the strategy outlined in the source shifts entirely to what we can call the pregame.
The pregame, yes.
Yeah.
The defining characteristic of homes that are moving quickly and closing at favorable terms right now is that the vast majority of the work was completed weeks before the listing ever appeared online.
Really?
Weeks before.
Weeks. The old model of, throwing a sign in the yard and just figuring out the details later, that is a guaranteed path to that week 7 reactive price drop. Okay, let's break down the mechanics of this pregame checklist. Starting with, obviously, the most sensitive lever, pricing. The mandate from the source is that pricing must be dialed in flawlessly from day one. You just cannot aim high and plan to adjust.
Correct. But here's the thing. Pricing is just the mathematical foundation, right?
Right.
The compounding effect actually comes from intentional presentation. Staging, professional photography, pristine physical condition. These cannot be secondary considerations.
Or things you fix after a few bad showings.
Exactly. You can't address them later. They are the prerequisites for even entering the market. If the photography doesn't immediately arrest the attention of a buyer who's just scrolling on their phone, the pristine condition of the physical home will never even be seen.
They'll just swipe right past it.
Yep, they'll never even walk through the front door.
And that leads directly into the marketing machinery. The analysis makes a huge point that the marketing cannot begin on the day of the listing. It has to be fully operational and generating anticipation before the first prospective buyer even steps onto the driveway. So true.
You're essentially engineering this psychological environment of scarcity and high demand before the doors even open.
Because you're trying to preemptively answer the buyer's psychological objections. If we look closely at communities where this dynamic is most intense in Sarasota, places like Sunrise Preserve, Waterside, or the west of Trail neighborhoods.
Yeah, highly desirable areas.
Highly desirable. But the side-by-side comparison pressure in those places is suffocating. In these micro-markets, buyers are often touring 3 or 4 nearly identical homes in the exact same afternoon.
Wow. So they're literally walking from one to the next.
Exactly.
And that comparison pressure completely changes the rules of engagement. Because if your home in West of Trail isn't presented intentionally, or if your pricing is even marginally disconnected from the immediate reality of the market, those buyers are not going to call your agent to offer constructive feedback.
No, they're not. They aren't going to say, hey, your paint color is distracting, or you're $10,000 too high. They're just going to silently walk out the front door and buy the house 3 blocks down that actually got the formula right the first time.
That's exactly what happens. The information asymmetry that used to favor sellers is completely gone.
Because of the internet.
Right. Buyers in these high-density, high-inventory neighborhoods, they have all the data. They know what the neighboring property closed for yesterday. So if your pregame isn't flawless, you aren't just failing to sell your home.
But what are you doing?
You're actively serving as the pricing anchor that makes the house down the street look like a much better deal. You are literally helping your neighbor sell their home at your own expense.
Oh, man. That is a painful thought. Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting, and I have to challenge this pregame philosophy just a bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because it completely flies in the face of, conventional, generational real estate advice.
It does.
Anyone who has ever sold a car or a piece of furniture or a house has been told by their parents to price it just a little bit high right out of the gate.
Leave room to negotiate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The logic has always been that you need to test the market. You can always lower the price later, but you can never raise it once you've anchored it too low. So why is that specific, deeply ingrained piece of wisdom now considered a mathematically terrible idea?
Well, because testing the market implies that the market is actually willing to give you a grade and let you retake the test.
Oh,
And a high inventory landscape completely dismantles that luxury. When you intentionally inflate your price to test the waters, you are voluntarily sacrificing your entire golden window.
you're just throwing it away.
You are. You're taking your 2 to 3 weeks of maximum exposure, literally the only time you have the attention of those highly motivated, alert-driven buyers, and you are actively using it to push them away.
Because those bloodhound buyers see the artificially high price, they instantly recognize it as disconnected from the comparable sales, and they permanently cross the property off their list.
Yep. They don't bookmark it to check back in a month, they just move on.
They're just gone.
And by the time the seller reviews the dismal showing data, finally accepts reality, and lowers the price to where it mathematically should have been on day one, the damage is irreversible.
Because the clock ticked.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The listing is now 30 days old. The new price might be perfectly accurate, but the perceived momentum is dead. The seller is now dealing with the days on market penalty,
Wow.
which means even the buyers who would have happily paid that new price on day one will now demand a discount, simply because the house has been sitting.
So they punish you twice.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The new paradigm we all have to internalize is that speed creates strength.
Speed creates strength. That
Yeah.
completely reframes the objective. Like, it's not about extracting the maximum theoretical dollar amount in a vacuum. It's about creating a competitive environment as rapidly as possible.
Why? Precisely. When you price accurately and present flawlessly from day one, you generate immediate overlapping interest. That speed creates a competitive tension among buyers.
They see each other at the open house.
Right. And that strength translates to vastly superior outcomes across the board. You aren't just protecting your final sale price, you are dictating the terms. You have the leverage to demand a faster closing timeline, to waive certain contingencies, maybe negotiate a rent back. You control the friction of the transaction because you hold the asset that multiple people want at the exact same time.
Okay, so let's bring all of these mechanics down to the bottom line for the listener. If you are walking through your own home right now, looking at your finishes and just seeing dollar signs, you have to recognize that we are living through a massive structural shift in the questions we are allowed to ask.
Yeah, the old questions don't work.
Right. The era of walking through a property and asking, what can we list this for, is over. That question is a trap. It's entirely obsolete. Asking that question guarantees you'll overprice, you'll miss the golden window, and you'll end up just chasing the market downward.
So the required question, basically the only question that matters today is, how do we position this specific property so that it sells quickly and with maximum leverage? The massive gap between the homes that generate multiple offers in a week and the homes that sit for months agonizing over incremental price drops. It isn't a matter of luck.
No, not at all.
It isn't a random fluctuation in interest rates favoring one street over another. It is entirely a matter of strategy and preparation.
Absolutely. And if selling a property is even a remote possibility for you in the coming year, the absolute most valuable asset you have at your disposal right now is time.
Use it wisely.
You have to. You must initiate the preparation phase far earlier than traditional wisdom suggests. And this isn't about rushing to put a sign in the yard prematurely. It's about giving yourself the runway to dial in the presentation.
It's about studying those side-by-side inventory comparisons in your specific micro-neighborhood, understanding the exact threshold of buyer fatigue in your area, and crafting a day-one strategy so meticulous that you completely monopolize your golden window.
The pregame is the entire game.
It really is.
But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder that sort of flips this entire dynamic on its head.
Okay.
Because our analysis today has been intensely focused on the defensive strategy of the seller, right? How to avoid the trap of the ticking clock and maintain your leverage. But consider the massive, almost comical blind spot this psychological shift creates for the buyer.
Oh, that's a great point. The information asymmetry works both ways.
Exactly. If human psychology universally forces buyers to automatically assume that a house sitting on the market for 45 days must have some hidden catastrophic flaw, how many perfect, absolute dream homes are buyers just walking right past?
Probably a lot.
Right. How many incredible under-the-radar deals are currently sitting in plain sight, completely ignored simply because otherwise rational, data-driven buyers are falling for the cognitive illusion of social proof?
It's so true.
The very anxiety that is stripping sellers of their leverage is simultaneously creating this artificial blindness in buyers.
It highlights the ultimate irony of the market. The herd mentality that punishes sellers who miss their window is the exact same mentality that prevents buyers from capitalizing on perfectly good homes that just happen to have a high days on market counter.
It's fascinating. The real estate market isn't just a spreadsheet of square footage and interest rates. It's a live reflection of our shared cognitive biases and our collective anxieties.
That's
So the next time you scroll through a listing app or walk through your own home analyzing its value, remember that the most powerful force in the room isn't the granite countertops, and it certainly isn't the dollar sign you start with. It is the ticking clock and how you choose to play against it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.